with flames crowning her head as the sun kissed the horizon. The goddess Bridgid was born of the union of the Dagda, ancient Irish god of life and death, and the Morrigan, goddess of war, death and fate. However, when the time came, as if whispered on the very wind, Bridgid heard a call to adventure that resonated deep within her soul, not to conquer like her parents, but to learn and discover. Not to battle, but to teach, inspire and heal. And so, stirred by this gentle, quiet knowing, Bridgid established a sanctuary of sorts amidst a grove of ancient oaks, where there was a life-giving well and an eternal sacred flame. And since then, she has been evoked by Leinster men on their way into war, along with healers, artists, poets and ironmongers alike. My name's Hazel Gale. I'm a former therapist turned author and creator of the fantasy mental health game Betwixt. And over the last few months, I have been delving deeply into archetypal journeys, those encounters and challenges of life that are so fundamental to the human experience that they're like rites of passage. By exploring these paths and the archetypal characters who walk them, we can glean profound insights into our own personalities, behaviour and choices. Now, the one archetypal journey that almost everyone has heard of is the sickeningly ubiquitous hero's journey. I've said quite a bit about how we place too much emphasis on the hero, which is true, but it is still an important leg of the journey. And the way we venerate this archetype, especially in the West, means that the version of this journey that we usually get fed is a little warped, with an overemphasis on hypermasculine and individualistic elements, such as going into battle and seeking personal glory. And now you know what I'm talking about, let's switch our language. Rather than hero, I prefer the gender-neutral name warrior for this archetype, so we can avoid mentally associating the journey solely with men. And because I know that people are going to find this irking, please know that these two names for this archetype get used pretty much interchangeably across sources. Interestingly, those who do differentiate between the hero and warrior see the hero as an immature childhood version of this archetype, one who naively believes themselves invincible and therefore sets themselves up for a catastrophic failure, aka their fall, from which they will rise again as the more mature warrior. As in real life, we can take and retake this journey many times in different ways. I don't see the need to use both terms here, so we can stick with the warrior. That said, it may be helpful to remember that the warrior is a masculine archetype, even though that doesn't necessarily mean male. You can think of the warrior as the asserter of boundaries. It's the part of the personality that fights for our personal values and sense of purpose. And it is, therefore, essential for people of all genders, because we all possess both masculine and feminine aspects of the self, and thank goodness for that. The part of the warrior's journey that I want to give some attention to here is the all-important call to adventure. What truly stuck with me after reading K.M. Weiland's writing archetypal character arcs was the idea that if a character merely sketches out an expected warrior's journey, a socially acceptable adventure, rather than embarking on their real, authentic one, they risk creating a deep rift within themselves, a tear in the very fabric of their soul, which will not only prevent their successful completion of the warrior's journey, but also other journeys in their life too, by trapping them in the shadow versions of any subsequent archetypes that they access. In plainer language, this means that we can wind up leading lives that feel disconnected and unfulfilled at best, or bitter, manipulative, and conflict-ridden at worst. Now, of course, when Weiland was writing about this, she was talking about fictional characters, and these archetypes are better understood as fictional motifs than as real people. But the reason they and their journeys are so powerful is that their stories serve as resonant metaphors for experiences we're each very likely to have in life, in our own ways. This is why they have been cropping up in story after story since the mythic beginning of time. And the call to adventure is one of these important motifs. So how can you recognise and heed your authentic call? This calling is more than an invitation to do something heroic. It is an invitation to break the mould in some kind of way and to align with your own desires, values and purpose instead of those laid out for you. And while it's surely possible for our respective calls to adventure to match what other people would expect of us in our lives, it's not that likely. And even if it were the case, their expectation cannot play a part in it. Because the call to adventure is about individuation, the psychological process by which we become distinct from those who've raised us or anyone else around in our early lives. And this means that it takes courage just to hear the call, let alone follow it. Just like Bridgid's call to heal and teach and inspire rather than following in the combative footsteps of her parents, your call will whisper to you. in moments of stillness, nudging you towards what you've always known deep inside but may have been just too afraid to acknowledge. Bridgid's sacred flame symbolises inspiration and creativity, and it is said that Bridgid ignites the desire in poets and musicians to create their work. She represents that vulnerable flame inside all of us that, although capable of burning brighter than you could ever imagine, is always at risk of being extinguished, snubbed out by other people's criticism or the fearful urge to fit in, to be nice, acceptable. So ask yourself this: when does that flame burn brightest for you? What causes it to flicker and glow and come alive? Because only you can know. Think of Bridgid standing among those ancient oaks, feeling that undeniable pull. The call isn't about grand gestures or dramatic quests. It's about the quiet, persistent yearning to align with your true self, regardless of what others might think, regardless of what your parents or teachers or friends have chosen to value. We are all whispered to in this way, and those who ignore that whisper, and there are many people in that group, find themselves in a life half-lived, where the shadow of their potential haunts their every step. And I don't tell you this to scare you, unless you get scared into action, I suppose. My point is that it's never too late to reclaim the silenced or forgotten parts of yourself. It's never too late to heed the call and step into who you truly are. Be that a warrior or a healer or an artist or a teacher or whatever. It's just never too late. I would love to hear about your calls to adventure in the comments, especially as they may serve as inspiration for those who have not yet been able to take the very first step. So please, if you have a story, share it in the comments or make a video reply. And regardless of whether you have a tale to tell, I really hope this helps. Finally, as always, if you'd like to take an epic journey through a magical world in the name of personal growth, then you can download Betwixt, the mental health game, which is available on the iOS App Store and Google Play.